you from my apartment here, as strange as that is. I really wish we were in a room together so that we could have true Q&A and true dialogue. And it's frustrating to me that we need to communicate in this format. But we do have a tremendous amount of information to share with you. AP teachers around the world have received emails from the College Board this evening with links to the AP testing guide and other AP information. And on the next slide, we're going to list the information that you've received this evening by email. This is all on our website at cb.org/AP2020. Now, sometimes your caches don't renew, even though we've updated the website, so you might not see some of this information until tomorrow if you haven't cleared your cache. But all this information is now on our website at cb.org/AP2020. This testing guide, an AP exam day checklist that we'd like students to fill out for each of the exams they take and to keep right next to them, because it will guide them through that exam experience and help them with information that they'll want to have at their fingertips. In addition, there is a list of required documents with links to those documents that students can print or download for specific exams. On May 4th, there will also be a link to the testing demo. And we'll talk more about this testing demo later in this session. But this testing demo is key because it allows every student to check to make sure that they are able to connect to the AP exam. If they cannot connect to this demo, they're not going to be able to connect to the AP exam on test day without some troubleshooting steps. So this is a key, this is maybe the most important thing a student can do between now and the AP test is go to this demo available May 4th and see if they can use it on their computer. If their computer allows them to use this demo, their computer will allow them to take the test on the test dates. There's information about world language and culture exams that doesn't relate to any of you as AP math and computer science teachers, unless some of you happen to also teach a world language. And then there's detailed FAQs. Now, let me sort of describe the purpose of this testing guide. The testing guide is to lay out the policies for this year's exams. And in this testing guide, we have 4 sections. A section on how this AP exam e-ticket will work. This is the student's entry key to the exam. So it's critical that they understand how to get this exam e-ticket and how to use it to be able to access the exam on the scheduled date at the scheduled time. Then you're probably even more sick of hearing me speak than I'm sick of hearing myself speak at this point. So I've asked 2 of my great colleagues to help present this information this evening. Daniel Koppelman, the executive director who helped set up the AP Live YouTube classes. That was her vision. She's here to present information about 5 steps that students can take before exam day. Then another great executive director in AP, Edward Biederman, who works to provide information to all of our regional offices to help them help schools. He'll present information on AP exam day tips for successfully completing the online AP exam. And then I'll close out the session by talking about the exam scores, credit, and placement. Now, before we leave this slide, let me just speak quickly about this testing guide and its purpose. The purpose of this guide is to lay out all of the policies for testing. So if you don't see a policy in this testing guide and your students ask you a question that's not in here, you can tell your students, make up your own mind, make your own choice. For example, if a student says, can I open 3 different windows on my computer while testing because I want to have my notes in one window and my exam in one window and my typing document in another window. You're not going to see any information in this testing guide to answer that question. And that means the answer to the student is, sure, if you want to, that's just fine. There's no policy about that. So if there's not a policy about that in this guide, your response to your students' questions can be sure. If that's something you want to do, that's fine. That's your choice. An example might be, can an English language learner use a dictionary during the exam? You're not going to see anything on there in this guide, so your answer to that student can be sure. There's no policy on that. If you want to use a dictionary, that's just fine, because what this guide does contain are the policies that students need to be aware of so that they can test successfully on exam day. So let's go into the first example, which is, or this first category, which is this section on how to use the e-ticket. So every student's going to need an AP exam e-ticket in order to take the test. and they're going to receive a separate e-ticket for every AP exam they're registered for. So a separate e-ticket for AP Biology, as you see here on the screen, versus AP Calculus versus AP English. They will receive the e-ticket for that exam 2 days before the scheduled testing date for that test. On exam day, they're going to have to go back to that email and click on that yellow bar that says go to exam. And they need to do that 30 minutes before the test starts, because they're going to be asked to pass some security checks. And we want to make sure they have time to do that and that it doesn't cut into their time to answer the test questions. So the first thing for students to keep in mind is you need to enter that exam 30 minutes before the start of the exam to pass through some security checks. And the way you get into that exam is you go to your email, you pull up your e-ticket, and you click on Go to Exam. Every student is going to have a unique ticket that is coded with information specific to that student that will manage the security of that student's exam experience. So students cannot send the ticket to someone else without triggering those security alerts, which could cost them their chance to test. Each ticket is personalized, it's non-transferable, just for that student. Now you might be worried, what about my students that aren't getting emails from the College Board? We have the same experience. We feel that that students, this is not an email culture among students in this generation. It's just not an effective way to reach students. So despite the fact that we will be emailing each of them their e-ticket, many of them just won't receive emails from us for whatever reason. We'll talk about some troubleshooting for that, but the basic thing to remember is that doesn't matter, because we will also be putting the e-ticket for every student into their existing College Board account on myap.collegeboard.org. Now, because of what goes into creating these e-tickets and how critical this is to exam security, we reached a point in time where we passed a point of no return, where we had to lock in the pool of AP examinees so that we could code these tickets with the security features that they will have. We passed that point of no return last night. What that means is that even if I had a child of my own that wanted to take the AP Statistics exam this year, that child would not be able to test, because to add anyone else into this e-ticket creation process at this point, now that we're past the point of no return, would mean stopping and rebooting that system and costing every other student who was registered the chance to test. We simply don't have a way, given the security constraints involved with that home testing, to add any additional students into this e-ticket creation process right now. So we know that some of that is due to a school making an error. The student thought they were signed up for AP Computer Science A, but the school never sent us an exam registration for that student. We feel really sad about that. We would love for that student to be able to test. Unfortunately, we just do not have an option now that we've reached that now that we've passed that point of no return for creating these e-tickets. So the students will use those e-tickets, and they are good for the test dates on the next slide. Every student is scheduled now for these test dates, regardless of what they were originally scheduled to do back when test dates were earlier in May and there were makeup dates the third week of May. All of that is out of the window at this point, because these are now the new test dates. So every student is registered for these dates, regardless of what dates they were originally scheduled for. Unless there's a significant conflict, they should stick with these dates, so they have the June dates as a backup if they have any disruptions while testing. Disruptions happen all the time when students are taking tests in schools. There's no reason to believe that will be any different at home. So students should save those June dates in case they're disrupted when testing at home. Now, this is a really simple process. If a student cannot test on these May dates, and they know that before the test begins, they have some sort of a known conflict, the process is so easy. They simply ignore their May e-ticket, and we will then automatically send them a different e-ticket for makeup testing in June. It's that simple. If a student has a conflict on any of these dates, they just ignore the May e-ticket, and we'll send them a different ticket for makeup testing in June, 2 days before those June dates. Let's go to the next slide. This is focused now on those June dates. Again, students will get automatic tickets for these June dates if they don't use their May e-ticket. Students can also request an e-ticket for these June dates if they start their exam in May and it gets disrupted. We'll talk more about that process for requesting a makeup if you're disrupted a little bit later. As I've said, as always this year, students are going to get their specific e-ticket for their specific exam 2 days before that exam. You'll see here that we've had to pile up the exam schedule in this first week of June, so there are more conflicts. Just one more reason that students should stick with the May dates unless it's not possible for them to do so. Let's go to the next slide. So students will need to test synchronously worldwide. AP teachers and coordinators should help students identify what time the AP test will be in their own time zone. So we've got a chart here. You can see we've published testing times for different time zones around the world. In New York, the AP biology exam, for example, will be 2 p.m. In Los Angeles, it will be 11 a.m. In Madrid, it will be 8 p.m. Test time zones are hard for students to keep track of. I think this is where we will see the biggest number of mistakes this year. Students simply not remembering to test at the right time in their time zone. So part of the reason of the checklist that you'll be helping students fill out is for them to write in the testing time for your time zone, as well as the time that they should check in 30 minutes before the exam to do their security checks. Because if they don't check in 30 minutes before the testing time, they will be cutting into their exam answering time to do the security stuff. Let's go to the next slide. Now, there are a bunch of myths we've heard from students that we thought it might be helpful to give you some verbiage to help clear up. And one of those myths is that students generally think that a free response exam is going to make it harder for them to get a score of 3, 4, or 5. That is just, that is not true. But it's a real fear among students. The majority of AP students strongly prefer multiple choice to free response and find the multiple choice easier to do. But that doesn't make multiple choice an easier way to get a 3, 4, or 5, because even if an exam question seems more difficult to a student than expected, the student doesn't need to worry. Difficult questions require fewer points to earn scores of 3s, 4s, and 5s than easier questions do. So this year's scores will be very similar to prior year scores, even if the question's still more difficult to students because of the time or because they don't have the multiple choice to bolster them. They don't need to worry about that, because we will, as always, psychometricians will analyze the difficulty of the test questions. Based on the difficulty of this year's questions, the cut scores for earning AP 3s, 4s, and 5s will be set to make it not more difficult, not more easy to earn a 3, 4, or 5 this year than any other year. And AP exams are never graded on a curve. You can see this in the second bullet. This year's exams are no different. Students are not competing against any other students. There's no maximum or minimum number of students who can receive a specific score. All the students who hit the cut score, the required points, will get scores of 3, 4, or 5 this year. Here's the biggie. Students should not worry if they don't complete all parts of the question before they need to attach and submit their response. To give students as many different chances as possible to demonstrate what they know, a question may have more parts than can be answered in the allowed time. So students should think of this year's AP exam as not something they have to race through, but as sort of a basket or a cornucopia of different ways to show what they've learned in your courses. So they should focus on doing well the aspects of the question that they know, rather than trying to race through all of it and feeling depressed if they don't hit every last topic. Again, in an exam that is shorter, we want to still give students as many different ways to show what they know, so the exam tends to be more full than it would be in the past. And again, that doesn't mean kids have to finish it. It's to give them a way to earn points in a variety of different parts of that question. Students do not need to complete the entire question to get a score of 5, but they do need to submit whatever work they've done before the time expires. We want students to hear the message that they are AP students, which means they are learning to be resilient problem solvers. And if they see a part of a question that feels unfamiliar, they should stick with it. It may be asking the student, as AP questions have often done, to use their knowledge and skills to analyze a new situation. So we want AP students to stay calm and look for ways to apply what they know to whatever they see in front of them on that exam. Let's go to the next slide. Also, we want to be frank about the limitations of a shorter exam. Because creating a good testing environment at home is a challenge for some students, the exam had to be shorter this year, and that's true for the security protocols as well. They demanded a short synchronous exam. So in a year when the exam provides students with fewer questions than usual to show what they've learned all year long, we want to make sure they feel supported by us, that they will have a fair opportunity to earn the college credit they deserve. So AP teachers will have a chance to review student scores when they receive them in July, and their exam responses when they receive them in May. And if teachers feel convinced, as you as teachers, as you look at the scores, if any of your students who didn't get a score of 3 or higher, that feels very surprising to you. It feels like maybe that shorter exam just didn't give your student, that specific student, a fair chance to demonstrate all that they knew how to do in your class. You will have an opportunity to request a review and a confirmation of that score to ensure that it does reflect what you know that student was capable of doing. We're providing this just for this year because that shorter exam doesn't provide your students with as many opportunities to show off what you've taught them as the typical longer exam does. And we just feel this is fair. So we'll provide details about how to do that in July when we release the scores, in case that's helpful to any of you, if you just see anything that doesn't feel right, given the shorter nature of the exam and a score that you find surprising for one of your students. Let's go to the next slide. So the way this will work is that the exam questions will be viewed by students in a web browser like Chrome. When they click their e-ticket in that email from us or on our website, clicking that e-ticket will open up the exam question in the browser, in a browser like Chrome. Students cannot type their responses directly into that browser. They need to open up a different window or take a piece of paper to write their responses to. So they're looking at our browser for the questions, and then they're crafting their response elsewhere. And they have these 3 different options for crafting their response. Excuse me. Option number 1, they can copy and paste a typed response. Option number 2, they can attach a typed response. And option number 3, they can handwrite their response, which we know many AP Calculus students prefer to do in particular, and then attach 1 or more photos. So let's go to the next slide. I'll talk about each of these 3 options in a little more detail. Option number 1 is the copy and paste option. This requires the students to type their response, copy and paste it, and then click submit. The best device to use for this is a laptop or a desktop computer where it's much easier to type. Students can type their response in Google Docs, Microsoft Word, Notes, or a similar application. They should not include images. None of the AP questions this year will require students to create a graph or a diagram or an image of any sort. And students should save their work often as they go. In that document that they've opened up, they just type their AP ID and their initials at the top. And when the timer has 5 minutes remaining, they need to copy and paste from where they're writing or where they're typing directly into our browser where there's a space for them to paste their response. Then they click submit, and it will begin uploading for us. The exam day setup that we recommend is for students to open side-by-side windows. On the left, to open to position that window that they've opened when they clicked their e-ticket and the exam appeared in the browser. Keep that open because you'll be able to see your test questions there, your timer, and you will need to paste your response there. But then you should open a second window next to it where you can open up your document, your Google Doc, your Microsoft Word, or whatever, where you're going to type your response. So it's very, very simple. The student is just reading the test questions in the browser that opens when they click their e-ticket, and they're typing their responses somewhere else and then pasting them right in before the time runs out. So it's very simple. Option number 2, this option is attaching a typed document and then clicking submit. Very similar to the cut and paste option. Students should use a laptop or a desktop. They should type their response in Google Docs or Microsoft Word or Notes or another word processing application, Mac Pages, for example. They need to then save that document in one of these accepted file formats, a PDF, a doc, and so on. They need to type their AP ID and their initials at the top of each response. And when the timer has just 5 minutes remaining, they need to save it one last time, go over to the browser where the exam is, click the attach button, find their saved file on their computer, attach it, and click submit. They do this once for each of the 2 questions that will be on your exams. They do it once at the end of the first question and once at the end of the second question. They'll need to submit 2 separate documents, one for each question. The exam day setup is the same as I just described for the copy-paste option. One window in which they view the test questions and the timer, and that they use to attach and submit their file. The other window where they type. The third option, which again we know is very appealing to many calculus students, is the handwriting option. This is attaching photos of handwritten responses and then clicking submit. The best devices to use here are smartphones or tablets. Students will need to take paper, white lined paper, 8.5 by 11 or whatever the closest equivalent to that is, and write their responses on that paper. They will write their AP ID, their initials, and the page number at the top of each page of their response. They'll need to write their response clearly with a dark pen or pencil. On their smartphone, they'll be watching that timer, which is at the bottom of the test question. And when that timer has just 5 minutes remaining, they should stop writing, stop working on the question, take a photo of their response, 1 photo for each page of their response, attach each of those pages, and don't click submit until they've attached each of the pages. Once you've hit submit, it's the point of no return. So students should line up their pages, take a photograph of each of them, attach all those pages, and only then click submit. The acceptable file formats are PNG, JPEG, and JPG. Students will be using that smartphone or tablet to look at the test questions, to see the timer, to take the photos, and to attach and submit their photos. I want to be clear that there's what some students will find frustrating about this option in some of your subjects is the need to scroll up and down within a test question. So students should be aware of that frustration, and they'll have the chance to practice this in the exam demo and decide which option they want to use. But it is frustrating to have to scroll back and forth on a small screen through a long test question. And I see that more of an issue with AP statistics questions and AP computer science questions perhaps than with AP calculus questions. So pros and cons to each type of at-home digital exam experience. And we just want students informed so they can make good decisions. Now we're going to skip the next 2 slides in this testing guide because they're designed for music theory students and world language students. And we're going to go right to the testing for students with disabilities. The deadline for submitting or for requesting an accommodation if you have a disability is January 17th. So those have been submitted already well before schools closed. Students have been approved for those accommodations. And as a result, any student that was approved for extended testing time, their timer on their online exam will be automatically set to provide them with that extended time. There's nothing else they need to do. They're going to automatically receive that. But some other accommodations that don't relate to extended testing time are described here as well. For example, if a student is visually impaired and has assistive technology like screen reader software or Zoom functionality, you can let those students know that they're going to be able to take the exam with no problem. These online AP exams are compatible with those technologies. If a student has been approved to use screen reader software, they should just make sure they can use that software in Chrome, Firefox, Safari, or Microsoft Edge, because Internet Explorer won't open up the AP exam. About 4% of Americans use Internet Explorer, and it is not a valid browser for the AP test this year. Students who are approved to use specific devices or aids may use what they have access to at home, and students who have already been approved for a reader or a scribe can be assisted by a family or a household member to serve that purpose. Now, a situation that some of you will encounter is you'll get a panicked call from a student 48 hours before an exam saying that they just broke their arm, or they sprained their wrist, or they broke a finger, and they're not going to be able to type or to write. So we have a process for rapidly approving those students for temporary accommodation as well. So if any students come to you with that need, what you should do is refer them to your AP coordinators. And if for some reason you're not getting the help you need from your AP coordinator, there's a link here where you can go and help the student get approval for an accommodation if they've had a temporary injury that will affect their ability to test. As a reminder, students can only use accommodations that they received prior approval from College Board Services for Students with Disabilities. Let's go to the next slide. So stuff is going to happen. If we think about 3.2 million students taking AP exams online at home, stuff is going to go wrong. Stuff goes wrong when students test in their schools. And if you think that in any given year, about 5% of students testing in their schools have some sort of disruption, it's hard to believe that at least that same proportion of disruptions won't happen when students are testing on their own at home. So we've needed to design a very simple process to help a student out if something goes wrong while they're testing. What won't work is for the student to panic and to call you or to call AP services, because the pandemic has closed call centers all around the world, and students will simply hear a message telling them, fill out a makeup request form. That's all we can do if something goes wrong when a student is testing. So we just need to be very realistic about that with students. There's nothing that can be done once a student starts the test if something disrupts them, other than directing them to cb.org/requestmakeup, where they can fill out a makeup request form. So if something disrupts their exam, they can click their e-ticket to get right back into the exam, and we encourage that. But if they've lost a significant amount of time, they can go to that form at cb.org/requestmakeup and request a makeup test. To do that, they're going to need to reference their original May e-ticket, because they're going to reference something on it to fill out the form. There's a deadline for this. Students need to request the makeup if they're disrupted within 48 hours of that disruption. We'll then review the student's form, and we will send the student an email approving or denying their request the week of May 25th. If the student's approved, the student will receive that makeup e-ticket 2 days before the makeup test day. Students should be confident that even though they'll have to wait a week or two to hear back from our review of their request, they will receive approval for any of the following types of issues they encounter, or similar ones. If they get sick partway through the exam, if they're interrupted by family members, if they have battery failures, if they have power outages, if they have technical disruptions. But simply running out of time is not a valid reason to request makeup testing. Out of fairness to all students who are following the time, if you don't submit your response in time, you've lost that opportunity for college credit. The makeup testing request form is only for students who are testing and encounter a disruption. Because remember, if a student knows in advance that they have a conflict with the May date, they can just sit it out and ignore the May e-ticket, and they will automatically then receive an e-ticket for June. Let's summarize this on slide 19. We've built this so that the exam screen itself will guide students step by step on test day from the moment they click their e-ticket to the moment they submit. Most students will be able to test successfully using only the information on the slides I've already shared. But this is new for students. It's uncertain, and unexpected events can happen. So a lot of risk can be eliminated if students spend some time doing some additional preparation and technology checks. So that's what the rest of these slides are for. They're to provide you with additional details and policies that will help students understand and prepare in advance so they can approach the exam with confidence. So with that, let me turn the time over to Dana Koppelman, who's going to take us through 5 steps that we encourage you to do with all of your students before your exam day. Dana, take it away.
Thanks, Trevor, and thank you all for being here this evening. I want to take some time to walk through 5 things that we're telling your students to do to prepare for exam day, but that you as their teachers can walk them through to help better support them. This first slide is simply an overview. We're going to go through each step in depth as we move through the slides, but I wanted to provide you with the high level of the checklist that we want students to use to make sure they're prepared for exam day. First is to review their contact information. We've heard from several teachers, students, or others that some students haven't received the emails from the AP program. That's okay and not something that students need to be worried about. If they haven't received the emails, students can log into MyAP to see the email address that was used when they were registered for the test. We'll talk about other implications and how students will still be able to access exam information even if those emails aren't received in just a moment. 2, we want students to check their tech. We want students to be able to choose and prepare the device and the supporting documents that they're going to need for exam day well ahead of time so that they don't have to worry about that when they're sitting for a high-stakes exam. 3, what many have been waiting for, practice submitting their response. An online AP exam demo will become available and be available after May 4th for students to practice leading up to the exam window. For those taking AP World Language, the exam app for those courses will be available the week of May 11th and include a practice mode. Step 4 is what students will need for each exam. We want them to be able to gather the appropriate documents that they'll need, whether it's downloading, printing, or gathering additional materials. We ask students to consult cb.org/apexamdaydocs to find out more information. And finally, students will receive their exam confirmation and e-ticket emails. We want to make sure that students know what to do when they receive that email and what to do if they don't. This information is going to be available in their AP account, and we'll be able to walk through what your students should see and have prepared for exam day. Let's dive deeper. The first step we're asking students to do right now is to review their contact information. If your students haven't received an email update from the AP program, you should encourage them to sign in to MyAP. Once in there, they can confirm their email address by clicking on their profile and adjusting their account settings to make sure that the email address is the appropriate one they want to receive emails from. To further ensure that they're getting information from College Board, in the subscriptions, they should confirm that they've checked the box to receive updates from College Board. Finally, students should create a new contact with the email address collegeboard@e.collegeboard.org in their address book or Safe Sender list. Again, as I said, don't worry if students haven't received the email. The e-ticket they'll need to access their AP exam will also be posted in their MyAP account, and they'll be able to use that on exam day. Now let's talk about checking tech. We want to make sure that students are using the right device for their exam and that they're planning to create the appropriate response. A few things you should note and share with your students. Students will not need the lockdown browser on their device for the AP exam. Additionally, if students have the Grammarly plugin on their computer, they'll need to remove it to test. This is not because we're anti-grammar, but because the Grammarly plugin does not work and then allow the students to still sit for their AP exam. So again, please remind them to remove this plugin if it exists on their computer. For World Language exams, there will be specific device requirements that we'll share, including the app that becomes available on May 11th. When your students are choosing between handwriting or typing, they should keep in mind the following. First, this year's questions won't require students to submit graphs or diagrams. And while some students may be more comfortable handwriting responses in calculus, chemistry, and statistics, students can still type them, and we've created a guide for how to type symbols and formulas, which can be downloaded at cb.org/apexamdaydocs. In most subjects, using a smartphone might be a bit hard for students as they scroll back and forth within a question. We encourage students, if possible, to use a desktop or laptop where available. Let's now talk more specifically about typing versus handwriting. If your students are deciding to type their answers, they should choose ahead of time whether they'll be using Google Docs, Microsoft Word, Notes, or other applications. It's important to note that students will create their responses in a document, and then they'll either copy and paste their exam answers or attach and submit their responses within the online AP exam. We recommend that students turn on autosave, as we know that oftentimes this prevents any mishaps should something happen on their device. If students are using a cloud app document, like Google Docs, they'll want to attach the document rather than copy and paste, remembering that they need to download their response and save it to their device in the appropriate format. Before test day, students can prepare their documents by typing their AP ID and their initials at the top of the forms that they're going to be submitted, and then save it clearly in a folder that they can find on the desktop easily on the day of the exam. For courses with one question, such as the English courses and history, they'll just need to create one document per exam. For all other AP exams with 2 questions, students will need to create and save 2 documents per exam, as you see detailed here with the AP Biology Question 1 and AP Biology Question 2. As I noted before, students may, however, choose to handwrite their answers. Students will write their response with pen or pencil on paper, take a photo, attach the photos, and submit them. In order to do this most effectively, students should use white paper, either lined or unlined. If they're in music theory, there's a requirement for a specific answer sheet, which we'll share more specifically on the Music Theory webinar. Paper should be used in a standard size, 8.5 by 11 inches, and students should be using a number 2 pencil or a pen with black or blue ink. Because the maximum number of pages you can attach per question is 5, as Trevor noted earlier, at most, students will need 5 pages for English or history and 10 pages for all other exams. We want to make sure that students know it's highly unlikely they would need to use this many pages for their responses, because often it can just be responded fully in 1 to 2 pages. Similar to what I said about typing a moment ago, before test day, you can have your students prepare their pages by writing their APID, initials, and page number at the top of each page. This creates one less step for them to have to do as they're sitting for their exam between the windows of May 11th and May 22nd. Step 3, the AP 2020 exam demo. As noted here, beginning on May 4th, students can access an AP 2020 exam demo. It will allow students to practice the different ways that Trevor laid out to submit their responses. It should be noted that if students can't connect to this demo from their planned testing device, they also won't be able to connect to that on real exam day. So we want to make sure students are practicing, updating their browser as needed, or contacting the school's tech support if they can't get through to it. Now let's take a moment. As a former AP teacher, I want to give the advice that I would do if I were walking into the 2020 exam experience. You should all try the demo. As teachers, you're the ones closest to and most supportive of your students. And so we highly encourage that you begin to take this demo, which is a brief generic simulation that you can help prepare your students for the upload process on exam day. This demo is generic, meaning it's not course specific, nor is it intended to take the full length of what an AP exam would take. It provides practice typing or uploading an answer, and then most importantly, it provides the ability to become comfortable with the 5-minute upload process that occurs during the last 5 minutes of the exam window. So we encourage you to try this out, have your students try it out, and note that they can practice this multiple times. For those with world language students, beginning the week of May 11th, they'll be able to take the world language exams in a practice format on the app that they will use for the actual exam as well. Let's move on to step 4. What do students need to get ready for exam day? First, it should be noted that everything that students are required to have or recommended to have can be found at cb.org/apexamdaydoc. For all exams, except for those with portfolio components, the following is required: an exam e-ticket email, the completed exam day checklist, which I'll go through momentarily, the student's device and appropriate browser, as Trevor went through before, noting that Internet Explorer is not an appropriate browser for this exam experience, internet or cellular connection, assistive technology and devices if applicable. For those typing responses, they should make sure they have Microsoft Word, Google Docs, Notes, or another application ready to enter and save text. And it should be noted that students, because of our open notes policy, are permitted to have class notes or study guides, textbooks and other classroom resources, and previous assignments or assessments. I'll go through that a bit more in a few slides. You'll notice as my colleague continues to flip through the presentation that there are other subject-specific requirements. I encourage you to take time and review the exam day docs on the website listed and to continue going through this presentation so that you can best support your students. A brief note about the optional resources that we've said students can use on the exam. The following resources can be used, and students can use them either in a print format or digital. Their class notes or study guides, textbooks and other classroom resources, previous assignments or assessments, calculators for certain exams, but it should be noted that if they're using study guides that are shared, those study guides must be downloaded to their individual device to prevent collaboration violation. Also, I want to say a note about internet searches. Those searches will be a waste of time for your students and could put them at risk of an exam violation. As you're all probably well aware, the more time your students spend searching the web, the less time they're going to have to dedicate to answering exam questions. Internet-based facts and research aren't relevant to the AP exam, and it won't raise your students' scores. Most importantly, copying from websites, social media, or online forums is considered plagiarism and will be detected and scores will be canceled. If you want to learn further best practices and share them with your students, please go to cb.org/APOpenBookTips. Last, in the moments leading up to the AP exam, step 5, looking for the email exam confirmation and the e-ticket email. On May 4th, students will receive an exam confirmation with their AP ID and a list of the exams they're registered for. If they don't receive that email, again, remind them to remain calm, that they can find that same exact information located in My AP. 2 days before each exam that the student will take, they'll receive an email with their personalized e-ticket and AP ID. The same information will be available in My AP should they not get the email. Students need to remember that the most important thing is that they'll need to click on that e-ticket containing their AP ID to access their exam during the set exam window. A final note and something we've created to share with your students is an exam day checklist. The 5 steps we just covered are listed in this one-pager and will help students be prepared for the day of exam. Students can download this checklist, or they can simply read it and jot down the required elements on a Post-it note or piece of paper to keep next to them during the exam. The most important thing for them to fill in is their 8-character AP ID code, which is located on the e-ticket. Students will need this to check into their exams 30 minutes before the local start time. Now, to find out more about what's going to happen in exam day, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Edward Biederman, who will do a deep dive to help you better understand what students will be experiencing between May 11th and May 22nd. Edward?
Great. Thank you, Dana. In this section, we'll talk about the student's experience on exam day. We'll review topics on exam format and testing environment, exam security, answering questions and managing time, submitting responses, and troubleshooting if something goes wrong. Let's go ahead and dive in. We'll start with exam formats. Just as it has always been, exam formats are not the same for all AP courses. This year is no different. The chart on the left presents the exam format for the one-question exam. This includes both the English courses and all 3 of the history courses. The chart on the right presents the exam format for the two-question exams, which are all other courses, excluding world language courses, portfolio courses, and music theory. So for the two-question exams, students will also check in 30 minutes before the exam start time, and they'll complete a series of questions to confirm their identity. When the exam begins, they'll have 25 minutes to read question 1 and develop their response. After the 25 minutes is up, they'll have 5 minutes to copy and paste or attach the response and then submit it. After the 5 minutes is up, the exam will proceed to question 2. The exam will not wait for students to have finished submitting the response, so students should make sure they complete this step within the allotted time. Students shouldn't worry, however, about how long it might take for the response to upload. So long as they press submit, the upload will continue in the background. The system was built so that students could advance to the next question without having to wait for the upload to finish. Once question 2 starts, students will have 15 minutes to read it and develop their response. Here on this page, you'll see the time noted as 20 minutes. That's not correct. Students will have 15 minutes to answer question 2 and 5 minutes to submit. We've corrected this page in the guide that's on our website, so if you've already downloaded the guide, please go ahead and download it again. After the 15 minutes is up, they'll have 5 minutes to copy and paste or attach the response and then submit it. After those 5 minutes are up, the exam will end. And that's it. The process should be easy. Students check in and wait for the exam to start. They read the question and develop their responses. They copy and paste or attach the responses, and then they submit it. The next 2 slides in this guide provide additional details about the exam formats for the world language courses and music theory. We'll have live on-demand webinars for teachers of those courses, so we'll push forward to the testing environment. On exam day, students should find a place with as few distractions as possible. Finding a quiet room is best. If students can, they should enable the Do Not Disturb or quiet setting on their device. And they should probably let their parents, guardians, siblings, and even friends know when they'll be testing so they don't disturb them. Devices should be plugged in. If students have limited internet bandwidth, they should ask others on their network to limit the use of the internet during their exam, particularly high bandwidth activities such as video games like Fortnite and streaming services like Netflix. Students should make sure to have their checklist next to them and any required document for the exam. As it's true every year, security for AP exams is a top priority. Here are the security rules students should know and understand. Students may not incorporate work which is not doing. They may not provide or receive aid of any kind from anyone. We'll use sophisticated detection technologies and processes to identify students attempting to receive help through the web, a phone, or social media. These techniques will keep confidential to maximize their effectiveness. Attempt to cheat may be detected immediately during testing, or they could be identified in June or July at the time of exam scoring. Students should know that we'll scan exams with plagiarism detection software and share exam responses directly with each student's teacher. So students found violating exam security will face severe consequences, which can include having their names reported to college admissions offices for attempted cheating and their AP exam scores canceled. You and your students can find more information about exam security on AP Central, and you can report any cheating attempts at collegeboard.org/report cheating. Students will check into their exams 30 minutes before the published start time by clicking the specific e-ticket for the exam. They'll need to spend a few minutes passing through various security filters to confirm their identity. A timer will show how much time remains until the start of the exam. Once the exam starts, the exam question will automatically appear. Students do not need to, nor should they, refresh their browser. When developing responses for this year's exams, students should remember the following. For most exams, the question is divided into parts, labeled in alphabetical order. So students should use those letters to organize their response, making sure not to skip any part. Spell check and grammar check are allowed, but these tools will not provide an advantage. As we noted before, if students have installed a Grammarly plugin, they must disable it or the exam will not function. Students may print the test questions and annotate them if they like, but they cannot use annotation software to annotate online. For exams with more than one question, students won't be able to move on to the second question until the time for the first question has fully elapsed. And when it has, the second question will automatically appear. Just like in other years, AP will help students manage their time. During the exam, students will see a timer at the bottom of the screen showing how much time remains to create and submit the response. Students should probably keep that timer visible. 5 minutes before time is up, the timer turns red, and students will see a pop-up reminding them to submit their response. Stop where you are and copy and paste or attach your work, then click Submit. Please remember, students can still earn a 5 even if they don't finish a response. But if students don't submit their response on time, they won't get any credit for it. Losing track of time and not submitting a response before time runs out is not an acceptable reason for requesting makeup testing. AP will set standards for scores of 3, 4, and 5 this year, so it is not more difficult to earn high AP scores this year than it was in prior years. For a student's exam to be scored, they'll have to submit their responses. Submitting responses is a 2-step process: attaching or pasting the response and clicking Submit. If students don't click Submit before the timer runs out, their response will not count. We understand that some students may experience slow bandwidth on exam day, so we built the system so that uploads continue in the background while students move on to the next question. Students shouldn't worry about upload time so long as they click Submit before the time ran out. If their response continues to transfer after the exam ends, students should just wait for the confirmation page. Students should remember not to close their browser or turn off or restart the computer during this time. And if students never receive a confirmation page after they submit their response at the end of the exam, they should go to cb.org/request-makeup to explain the situation and request an e-ticket for the June makeup date. Now, despite everyone's best efforts this year, some things may go wrong. students shouldn't worry. If students accidentally close their browser, their device crashes, or they temporarily lose internet access, they can quickly click their e-ticket again to return to the exam. After having done so, students should continue the exam. And if they feel at the end of the exam that the temporary disruption negatively impacts their performance, they can request approval to take the makeup exam at cb.org/requestmakeup. The thing to remember is during the exam, students should not refresh their browser or hit the back arrow. And whatever students do, they shouldn't call. Customer service centers will not be open due to the pandemic. If students lost too much time to a technical problem, weren't able to connect to their exam, or experienced some other serious disruption, they can easily request a makeup exam. Trevor, I'll turn it back to you to talk about exam scores, credits, and placements.
Great, thanks very much, Edward. So as a lot of this is business as usual, but 2020 AP exams will be scored by AP readers who are college professors and experienced educators, and invitations will go out to prospective AP readers the first week of May. Scores will be reported as usual on the 1 to 5 scale. To accommodate the extended scoring schedule that we will need, given that their exams will need to be scored online in readers' homes this year, AP scores will be released to AP students approximately 1 week later than usual, beginning about July 15th, and AP teachers and educators will have access to the scores at that same time. We'd encourage students in the meantime to remember to go ahead and use their free AP score send. They can do that anytime between now and June 20th. They can set that up by signing into myap.collegeboard.org to indicate which college or university should get their scores. And then after June 20th, there's a $15 fee for each score report the student sends or asks us to send on their behalf, and a $25 fee if we need to rush that. On the next few slides, some students have asked about how colleges are responding to this year's shorter AP exam, and we've seen overwhelming support from colleges. And in case that's helpful to share with your students, we've just picked a handful of quotes that we have on the next 3 slides that you can share directly with students as reassurance. These quotes are representative and emblematic of what we're hearing across the country, where colleges really want to ensure that students are encouraged to keep studying, to keep working hard, to endure to the end, and to pursue the college credit they deserve. So with that in mind, we'll close with our sort of final position here. We want students to make the decision that's right for them. We want any student who's not interested in taking the AP exam to not feel pressure to do so. They have this opportunity to focus on other things. This is not the only priority in anyone's life. That said, we want any student who does want that opportunity, who's been working hard for it all year long, to still have it. That's our objective, that's our hope, that's what we're focused on. And more important than that, we want students to be safe and healthy. So we've tucked behind this closing one last slide that is only for students who cannot access the exam demo. Because if they click on that exam demo and cannot do it, that will be a signal to them that they're not going to be able to test on test day unless they change something about their device. So there's some troubleshooting tips here. All of these are free solutions for a student to change their device so that they'll be able to access the AP exam demo, which will tell them in turn that they're able to access the AP exam. So if your students report back to you that they're not able to do the demo, refer them to this page. If they're still not able to access the demo after completing this page of troubleshooting tips, encourage them to reach out to your AP coordinator for connection to a tech expert in your school or district. So with that in mind, I think we have time for just a couple of questions. And while Dana and Edward are pulling any that have been particularly sort of frequent or repetitive in the chat bar, I can let you know that we will send out this webinar by email, a link to it, as well as a link to the FAQ document. We'll go through the chat, and any questions that are matters of policy, we will ensure that they are reflected in the FAQ document. But many of these questions that I'm seeing are questions that are up to the student, what they want to do. There's not a policy about them. So Edward, Dana, any key questions that you'd want to flag for now?
Hi, Trevor. I have one that's just about the exam logistics. We talked about the 3 different options that students can use in terms of how they want to take and then submit their answers. Knowing that many individuals on this call have students sitting for 2 questions, is there the option for students to type one question and handwrite another, or do they have to select the option that they're going to use throughout the entire 50 minutes of the exam experience?
They can type one and handwrite the other. There's, again, the rule of thumb is if that's not in the testing guide, they can do what they want. And there's no policy in the testing guide that says you can't, you have to send both of your responses through that same modality. We don't describe that path because it's just more complicated for most students. But again, they can do what they're most comfortable with.
Great. And then we see from a few of, go ahead, sorry.
So Trevor, there's a question here. There's a couple of questions in here about how to access the testing guide and whether or not students will get a copy of it and how teachers might be able to share it with their students. Can you say more about where teachers can get this and recommendations for sharing with their kids?
So our website is cv.org/AP2020. And this information is posted there along with all the information relevant to this year's at-home AP exams. That's where the demo will be posted. That's where the typing guide for the AP subjects, for these AP subjects will be posted. That's where the required documents and optional resource lists are posted. That's where the checklists are posted that students should fill out before each exam. It's all there. If you don't see it there right now, you just need to clear your cache or wait until your computer naturally clears its cache. That often happens overnight, and then you'll be able to view those resources. They're all there on our website right now. I saw a bunch of subject-specific questions in the chat. Please post those questions about specific features of calculus questions or statistics questions or computer science questions and how they will be managed in this year's exam. We have content experts sitting on the online teacher communities responding to those every day. So go to those College Board online teacher communities with any exam-specific questions that are about the nature of your discipline and the types of content skills that are tested. Do we have time for one last question, Dana or Edward?
Sure. The one other question I'm seeing, it's not subject specific. In terms of getting their students prepared, beyond them supporting their students, where should they send their students, or what other types of supports are available for their students from the College Board between now and the exam window?
So the list is, we can go back to slide 2. And this is the roster of supports. There's this testing guide that can be shared directly with students in whatever way your school thinks appropriate. There's this checklist that they should fill out before each exam that will support them to make sure that they are not missing any key steps that will set them up for success. There's this list of required documents and optional resources. There's this testing demo that will be available May 4th. Undergirding all of these things are videos that students can watch if it's easier for them to absorb some of this information by video. And then there's this FAQ document. That's the array of resources on, as you know, their AP free response practice questions remain relevant and remain the best practice students can be doing if they want to be doing the type of work that will appear on this year's free response question exam. But then I see that I brought us right up to the full hour, so I will briefly thank the AP Math and Computer Science teachers who have taken part of their evening to engage in this webinar this evening. I feel deep and incredible gratitude for what you're doing to help your students in many different aspects of their lives in these final months of this academic year. So thanks, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Take care.